Hi guys, Artie here, and today I'll be discussing when various cartoons, animations, and franchises will enter the public domain in America. Before you comment, a few people may believe that these dates aren't accurate since any work published after 1978 only becomes public domain 70 years after the creator dies. However, this protection only covers works and publications produced by a single person, such as books, novels, magazines, comics, indie films, indie games, and independent web cartoons. So something like AVGN, Scott the Woz, or Violet First wouldn't become public domain for a long time. This law does not apply to content or media produced by a collective group of people or a company, such as television shows, movies, video games, computer programs, and so on. These go into public domain after 95 years, well technically 96 years. One more disclaimer I need to get out of the way is that the current copyright law is highly subject to change in the near future, especially since companies like Disney are currently trying to lobby the government to extend the time frame. So expect this video to become very dated in a decade or two from now. Oh, and one more thing. The dates given here are a couple years earlier than you would expect, since TV pilots are always copyrighted before the actual series premieres. Another important note is that subsequent appearances where a certain character is introduced in a franchise cannot be used until that also enters the public domain, following the same rules. Another outlandish, but possibly true reality we may face is a catastrophic event or apocalyptic disaster like a nuclear war or asteroid impact could happen in the future. So we may not live to see these beloved cartoons enter the public domain. An even more terrifying but possible scenario is some type of dictatorship taking over in the future and banning all entertainment except for the pieces of media they approve. I don't guarantee it, but it sure is a possibility. Not to mention, it's so far in the future that we would be too old to comprehend what is going on or have been long dead. There may be technological advancements in health and science in the future that may extend the human lifespan, so we'll see. I will only be covering mostly shows and franchises from the 1980s and later, and nothing relating to Disney since many people have already covered the 1920s through the 70s and Disney IPs. If you want to learn more about productions prior to the 1980s entering the public domain, I recommend you check out Content Free Time's video. It was rather interesting and inspired me to make my own video about public domain and copyright law. There were a few that were missed, which I'll briefly cover. Fleisher Studios' Popeye the Sailor will become public domain next year in 2025. I have a feeling someone out there is already planning a Popeye horror movie. A majority of Hanna-Barbera shows made before the Turner acquisition will enter public domain from 2053 through 2089, using this time frame generally here since it would take all day to list out every single cartoon they've made. For example, Yogi Bear will enter the public domain in 2054, Top Cat in 2057, and Hong Kong Phooey in 2076. 1 year before Cyberpunk 2077 takes place. Now let's start out the video with Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers productions. SWAT Kats and Two Stupid Dogs would become public domain in 2089, and What a Cartoon shorts that later became series like Dexter's Lab, The Powerpuff Girls, Cow and Chicken, and Johnny Bravo would all become public domain in 2091. However, you would have to wait another year or so to use newer characters like Mandark that didn't appear until the respective series first aired. I don't know who in their right mind would do this, but the character designs from the seasonal Raw episodes of Dexter's Lab will be free to use in 2097. Ed, Edd and Eddy will enter the public domain in 2094, Courage and Billy Mandy in 2095, Evil Con Carne in 2097, Kids Next Door in 2098, Teen Titans in 2099, Foster's Home in 2100, Camp Lazlo and Ben 10 in 2101, Chowder, Total Drama and Out of Jimmy's Head in 2103, and Flapjack in the early pilot version of Adventure Time in 2104. For whatever reason you want to make a regular show horror movie, you will have to wait until the year 2105 to use the characters Mordecai, Rigby, Skips, Pops, Benson, Muscleman, and High Five Ghost. If you want to use Margaret, you'll have to wait until 2106, 2107 for Eileen and Mr. Maillard, and 2108 for CJ. The final version of Adventure Time in 2106, Gumball in 2107, Uncle Grandpa, Steven Universe, Clarence, and OKKO in 2109, We Bare Bears in 2111, Craig of the Creek in 2114, and finally Infinity Train in 2115. Now let's shift gears to Nickelodeon. The first three original Nicktoons, Rugrats, Doug, and Ren and Stimpy will become public domain in 2087. Rocko's Modern Life in 2089, Hey Arnold in 2092, and most importantly SpongeBob, one of the most popular cartoons of all time, will enter the public domain in 2093. That's if Paramount or Viacom Networks doesn't go bankrupt beforehand. Fairly Odd Parents, well, the pilot version in 2094, Chalk Zone in 2095, and Invader Zim in 2097. Jimmy Neutron is an interesting situation, since there was a test pilot in 1995, a more finalized pilot in 1998, a movie in 2001, and the TV series in 2002. You could use the deformed in 1995 Johnny Quasar version in 2091, but you can't use the more refined version of Jimmy until 2094. But anyway, Danny Phantom in 2099, since it had a 2003 copyright notice, Drake and Josh in 2100, Avatar in 2101, Barnyard in 2102, iCarly and the Mighty Bee in 2103, and for whatever reason, if you want to use the Fanboy and Chum Chum characters, it will also be in the public domain starting in 2103. Tough Puppy in 2106, The Loud House in 2109, and last but not least, the upcoming series Rock, Paper, Scissors enters the public domain in the year 2120. Either I'll be long dead by then or miraculously survived long enough to be 117 years old. Now our third group, adult animated shows. I decided to lump them all together into one category for the sake of saving time and not to convolute the video any further than it already is. Contrary to popular belief, The Simpsons will not enter the public domain in 2085, rather earlier in 2083, because the Simpsons family were originally part of the Tracy Ullman Show as a series of shorts. However, many of the side characters like Ralph Wiggum won't be up for grabs until a year later. The iconic dumbass duo, Beavis and Butthead, enters the public domain in 2087 in another Mike Judge series, King of the Hill, in 2093. If they ever make a King of the Hill horror movie, it will probably be about the world running out of propane. The prototype versions of the South Park characters from Jesus vs. Frosty will be copyright free in 2088. But the finalized versions of the boys won't be free until 2091 and a few years later for the secondary characters. New England's Wackiest Family, the Griffins from Family Guy in addition to Futurama and Home Movies and Mission Hill, joined the public domain in 2095. Oh, and Happy Tree Friends as well. I'd already consider it public domain with the numerous amount of fan animations online, and Mondo Media doesn't seem to care. Wow, a lot of cartoons are entering the public domain in 2095. 1999 was a great year for cartoons. Nearly all of them went on to become hits. Anyways, a year later in 2096 we got Aqua Teen Hunger Force, then the underrated series The Oblongs will be public domain in 2097, American Dad, The Boondocks and Robot Chicken in 2100, Code Monkeys in 2103, Archer in 2105, and Dan Vs. and Bob's Burgers in 2107. Nobody would want to do this, but you can make your own Alan Gregory horror movie in 2107 as well. Yay! Rick and Morty in 2109, Final Space in 2114, and finally Crapopolis in 2119. In my opinion, tax write-offs like Final Space and Mau Mau should be public domain by default, since the companies wouldn't be profiting from them. And for the last group, why not cover some PBS related content to round out the video? Not going to cover too much here since dozens of PBS Kids shows were based on books post-1978, such as Caillou, with many of the authors still living. Mr. Rogers would enter public domain in 2064, and Sesame Street would join a year later in 2065. I'm not going to even bother explaining the complicated answer to when Thomas the Tank Engine becomes public domain, since it was originally a book, then a TV series, and was also produced in England and they have different copyright laws. Some say it will occur as early as 2042 and as late as 2067. Arthur won't become public domain until 2071, but it is the first version of him that looks like an actual aardvark. The Arthur we all know today wouldn't become public domain well into the 22nd century. The first book using the modern version of the character was published in 1985, and the post-1978 law applies here, meaning you can't use it until 70 years after Mark Brown dies. Teletubbies, one of the worst series produced, will become public domain in 2094. No need to make a horror movie for that, it's already nightmare fuel. Dragon Tales would become public domain in 2095, Word Girl in 2103, and Nature Cat in 2111. And there we go. I think I covered most of the popular and relevant series here. It wouldn't be possible for me to cover every single TV show and cartoon ever made, like The Moxie Show or something niche like that. If you want to find out when your favorite cartoon enters the public domain, just take the year the first episode or pilot was finished and add 96. That will be your answer. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, notify, and check out other videos on the channel. You may like them. What character, show, or franchise do you think someone will make a crappy horror movie or game of next? Man, I can't wait for the SpongeBob horror movie in 2093, if I'm even still alive by then. Let me know in the comments.